And today I have Dr. Christian Northrup joining me. I got to know Dr. Christian Northrup in the very beginning of COVID, and we became fast friends and we talked regularly. And it was actually in spring of 2021 that she and some other extraordinary pioneers came together and decided to put together a study on the changes that they were seeing in women's cycles that they believed was due to shedding, vaccine shedding. Well, those results have now been made public. And so Dr. Northrup is going to join us today to talk about some of the more jaw dropping information they've discovered and uncovered. And Dr. Christian Northrup, thank you so much for joining me as always.
Thank you. Well, it was really interesting. Let's roll back to
Sure.
April of 2021. And April of 2021 was kind of the beginning of when they were rolling out the COVID shot.
Right.
And we were hearing from women all over the country,
Yeah.
90-year-olds getting their periods just from being near a recently inoculated person, 2-year-old girls bleeding heavily from being around recently inoculated grandparents, people who couldn't get on a plane without starting to bleed or have nosebleeds. That's the other thing that happened. People would have nosebleeds. Well, anyhow, at around this time, Facebook had large groups of women who had, sort of support groups. Are you finding this? And so on. One group was 100,000 women who were weighing in on this, that they were experiencing. And of course, Facebook took them down. And anytime you said anything, I mean, my God, back then you couldn't even question wearing a mask. Then we get back to Tiffany, and Tiffany begins to put together a group of volunteers, and we create a survey. And the survey was of unvaccinated, COVID negative, not that that PCR test means anything, but still, and no symptoms. So they're asymptomatic, no shots, no COVID, no nothing.
Right.
We got about 6,000 women in our database. Well, the first paper we published was on decidual cast shedding, which I know nobody has heard of, but let me tell you what it is.
Right.
It's when the entire inside of the uterus
Mm,
comes out after
mm.
days of cramping, and it looks like you just did a plaster of Paris cast of the inside of the uterus. So we're getting women sending us these pictures, and in the world literature, there are 40 cases that had been reported prior to COVID. In our subgroup of 6,000 women, we had 240 cases. Most gynecologists have never even seen it.
Wow.
Usually takes place after a big trauma, loss of a child or something.
Right.
And then suddenly we've got all these cases. So we published our first paper on that. Then we wanted to show something about this shedding, like what is it? And we had papers from 2015 saying that there was something there. And remember, in the original Pfizer documents, they told men, if you get the shot, do not get a woman pregnant for 6 months.
Right.
And if you got the shot, touching a pregnant woman was a reportable event. So what did they know? So we finally get the right people together, and we got a team of, I don't know how many people we ended up with, but all 100% volunteer people
Mhm.
who had the ability to do the scientific chi-squared, this and that. And
Right.
here's what we found. Within 3 days of being within 6 feet of a recently vaccinated person, 70% of our women were having abnormal bleeding. Now, it has taken 4 years to get this published. Do you think anyone wanted to publish this?
Mm-mm.
No.
Mm-mm.
And they wanted us to change the wording and all of the rest of it. It is a miracle that it has finally been published in the International Journal of Vaccine Theory, Practice, and Research, Volume 3, Number 2, 2024. And the thing is that Pierre Corey had been doing some work on shedding. Other people certainly have done work on this. And so this adds to a growing body of science showing something is going on, like something. And this is still going on for many women. So they will say, and since we published it, we've got a lot more data, and women will say, I have to decide, is it worth it for me to go to a gathering, like to a family wedding? Because if I do, I'm going to have an irregular period for 3 months
Oh,
afterward. Whatever is in there, it's a war on life. So how
right.
do you make it a war on life? Well, you put something in there, like the lipid nanoparticles are concentrated in the ovaries at 64 times the other tissues. And the number of miscarriages, stillborns skyrocketed.